Oh my God, is that trick or treaters?
Oh.
Oh my God, right, give me a second. Before they TP my house.
Teleport.
Toilet paper.
Yeah.
Go for it. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to What the Trans.
What
the
trans?
Magnificent.
One day we'll get that right.
Maybe Amber could put some auto-tune on it or something. What
the
trans?
From the 90s to now. Yes, so this is the news podcast, What the Trans. I am Ashleigh, and with me are...
Flint, hello.
Hello, I'm Alex.
And we are, well, we're going to do the news, but first, we're going to get caught up. How are you both doing?
I'm good. I've been I've been recently watching Traitors.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
It's actually been so good. I say actually like I've been some hipster contrarian. No, I've seen like a couple of seasons of the show now. I really love it. But like this season in particular is just it's great. It's so good. It's so good because they're so bad at it, and it's just that's actually really fun. And also the new Lily album, fantastic. So
Lily Allen album.
Yeah, the new Lily Allen album. That has been I did a listen through, so I've been very much enjoying that. That's been like quite an old. I don't know. I felt nostalgic as fuck hearing Lily Allen again, and I'm like
Yeah.
older now because that was one of the like albums that I bought when I was like preteen, teenager. How have you been? How have you been?
It's my birthday soon, so I had a meal with my parents, who are as agreeably middle class as I am. So when I introduced my partners to my parents, and they came away afterwards and said, well, that explains a lot. So having met them, they now understand. Like, okay, cool. I'm glad that we have that sort of commonality, I suppose. So yeah, had a meal. It was lovely. They got me a book token for the queer bookshop in Manchester. So again, they know me.
Yeah.
So yeah, excellent work. Well done, Mum and Dad. And so it's my birthday in a few days, and I'm going to go to the same restaurant again because it was really nice, and I want to try some more stuff off the menu.
Nice. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes. Turning the ripe old age of, let me see, I'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of my 21st birthday. So.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could have made up any odd number and people would have just taken it.
Yeah, I know, but I'm really, really bad at lying. Like, to the extent if I say something that's wrong accidentally, I have to derail the conversation to go back and correct it. So let's just try and get it right first time. And you, Alex, darling, how have you been?
Oh, I've been doing all right. I've sort of been back at my cooking again.
Excellent.
I also have been really imaginative and tried something new and exciting, but I just made cookies again.
Cool.
After the brownies, I've sort of been a bit more cautious, but I did a double amounts of cookies, had double the amount of cookies, and then I ran out of space for the cookie mixture, so I had a whole bunch left over, and I was like, oh no, what a shame.
What am I going to do with all this delicious cookie dough?
Raw egg.
Well, eggs that I stole from my parents as well, but that's a whole other story.
There's a whole other tale.
Egg thief confessed here on the pod exclusive.
Well, it's not my fault I like to crack eggs.
I see what you did there. So with the word, so you've taken them from your parents, you have yoinked them, you've yoinked the yolks, but I read a thing a little while ago, and I promise we'll get back on topic in a second. I read a thing a little while ago about how the word yeet and the word yoink kind of complement each other nicely.
They do.
Like you grab something and throw it away.
Yeah. The Lord yoink what is
Yes,
it? The Lord yeeteth
yeeteth and the Lord yoinketh away. Yes. But then that just made me think of the Queens of the Stone Age song First It Giveth, because that goes the same way. So first it yeeteth, then it yoinketh away.
Yeet to me just means it's just now become recontextualized into the thing that Jey Uso does when because he's a wrestler and his whole thing is yeet and like because yeah, and it started because he got really drunk at a press conference. Like him and Cody Rhodes, another wrestler, got really drunk at a press conference, and so Cody Rhodes kept going, "Oh," and like and Jey Uso was just like, "Yeah, yeet," in the middle of whatever he was saying.
Hi Jay, hi Cody. Congratulations.
I really recommend you check it out. There's an amazing clip where he's giving like a rambly answer to a question, and then he just goes,
Feel me? You feel me? Like,
and then Cody Rhodes just turns and goes,
Do you feel him, sir?
do your 20-year-old self.
and it's so it's so good. And then that just became his thing. After that, he was like, everyone loved it. Everyone, oh my god, yeet. And now that's his thing. And he comes in, and everyone is like doing the hand movements of yeet, and it's great. Gets the place hyped.
I've always wondered what the origin of the yeet as a term.
Well, it's not actually from there.
Ah.
It started as a meme. I believe it was a meme of this one kid who threw a bottle, and I don't know if he deliberately meant to hit someone, but I think he threw a bottle and it hit someone, but just before he threw the bottle, he went, yeet! And that was it. That was it. And then it became a meme, and I think Jey Uso was drunk doing the meme, and then they were like, oh, branding, let's go. Once everyone reacted positively, because, money talks.
Yes, yeah, let's do it. Speaking of let's do it, let's do it. That was a really, really appropriate way to swing into talking about transgender activism.
Yeah, let's yeet our way to Action Alley. Yeet ourselves into... I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
Alex is learning a new word.
If you're local to or able to travel to Widnes, on November 13th there is a walk across the Jubilee Bridge from Widnes to Runcorn in solidarity for Trans Awareness Week. Get to the Widnes end of the bridge for 7 p.m. You can sign up at the Eventbrite page we'll put a link to in our references section.
If you've been affected by the Virgin active ban on trans people in the bathrooms and changing rooms as either a member or a staffer, then Lowe's Gems at the Good Law Project would like to hear from you at... we'll link it.
We'll put that link in.
I almost read it like an email address there for a second.
And as ever, there's always an opportunity to try and speak to your MP, and Transaxle have a tool to make sending an email to them as easy as possible. 6,500 people have already used this, which is a fantastic response. The goal is 12,800. So if you've not joined in yet, now's the time, and get your allies in on it too. We need as many people as possible to point out how backward-looking and twisted the draft code is and why, and when it's laid before Parliament, it should be sent packing.
And following on from that one, Amnesty also encourages you to write to your MP to prevent the UK from pulling out the European Convention on Human Rights. So you could write one letter and talk about both things.
Yeah, we'll put the appropriate hyperlink in so you can just go straight to those pages. Not gonna lie, the European Convention on Human Rights thing is something that I added to the script like 10 minutes before we started recording, so we don't have quite the same breadth of detail that we do about the other things. But staying in the ECHR is really important, because if we don't, that's gonna open the door to all sorts of unpleasantness, not just for trans people.
Yeah, it's one of the only courts that's above our Supreme Court in terms of the hierarchy of things. Just to put it into a perspective in case people aren't aware. So next up we have pond hopping, and normally we come in with a bit of a high energy and we play the jingle and we've not done the segment recently, genuinely it's been because the Gender Clinic files, like the miniseries, has just been our main focus, understandably. But this week, we wanted to take a moment to talk about one story that's really grabbed our attention, and we're going to have to give a trigger warning for suicide.
If you want to sit this one out, the next story starts at 11 minutes and 18 seconds.
So, Leah Smith, a student in Vermont who was an outspoken trans advocate and athlete, died this week. This news has hit us hard, so we're not going to go into details, and we aren't going to do our normal discussion after. Instead, we're going to link you to an article by Erin Reed that we feel sums up a lot of the feelings we're kind of going through right now. And it's titled, "Every Trans Suicide is a Murder by Those in Power." Leah was 21 years old, and it's just really sad to hear news of that kind from especially someone that young who was doing so much good work. And yeah, just awful news. We didn't feel right ignoring it. We also didn't feel right putting it into the segment as if this news is, the same as the news that we normally put in Pond Hopping. So yeah.
And unfortunately, the somber tone will not let up, because to begin with, we have to talk about something else that's quite difficult. Now, full disclosure, we've got an ongoing talk about this within the team, and we've found it quite hard to reach any kind of solid conclusion. This might be another difficult segment to listen to, as we will be briefly mentioning the murder of a trans teenager. You probably know which one. And if you're not up to that just now, Amber from the future will give you another time code to skip to if you want to skip over this segment altogether.
26 minutes and 41 seconds.
So with that out of the way, let's talk about Esther Jai. She is, of course, the mother of murdered teen Brianna Jai, and we cannot even imagine how hard that must have been for her. We don't even want to speculate. We all know what happened and how it happened, but we do want to talk about how Esther is working through some very real and justifiable stuff. And unusually, for this section of the show, what we're going to do now is a little bit more of a discussion. We're going to raise some points, and we're going to try and do so sensitively, because there's a lot of stuff in this that we kind of have to talk gently around, I think. So,
Yeah.
In terms of what Esther Jai has been doing.
It's one of those things where two things can be true at the same time. Obviously, we want to make sure that we are always speaking compassionately about someone who's going through one of the most awful things that someone can go through. We also do have to talk about the way in which some policy decisions that could be made in lieu of Brianna's murder might actually cause some harm for trans people. And let's contextualize fully the conversation before we start talking about our reactions to it.
So, Esther has hosted a reception at the House of Commons. On Tuesday, she started a campaign called the Phone Free Education campaign, and that's supposed to highlight the danger that mobile phones can have on people's mental health. And scrolling through social media and toxic body image and some other content that you might encounter on social media, which is not the best, like pro eating disorder content and kind of things like that, basically.
Yeah.
There is a lot of genuinely disturbing and harmful content online, and Brianna herself was hospitalized for an eating disorder. So has she been inspired to do that? Has she felt pressured? Has she been doing that as a locus of control over her body? There's a lot of stuff to try and pick through here.
A lot of trans people do struggle with, obviously, big part of dysphoria is body image, and dysmorphia is not the same thing as gender dysphoria, obviously, but I think we all know at least one person, if not ourselves, who has at some point tried to control the way their body looked because they haven't been able to take whatever steps they really feel they need to be able to bring it in line with themselves if they even know what those are yet, right? It's just a very common experience with many people in the community. I think where a lot of the concerns are is the framing.
Yes.
That's really where I think a lot of people in the community are starting to get
A bit
tense.
concerned.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's the way that the framing is so focused on mobile phone usage and the way that that affects mental health.
Yeah, like, and how Brianna had previously used her mobile phone to access this content,
Yeah.
while also saying how much it's affected her.
The way that they focus so heavily on the phone usage and mental health aspect, whilst they do acknowledge that Brianna was killed by other people and that those people were accessing likely very dark, very inappropriate materials themselves.
Yes.
The focus is on the content and not on the interpersonal violence. And we've all been reeling from this murder as interpersonal violence. And the more it gets framed without addressing that this was violent and a hate crime, when we make the sole focus screen time instead of hate crime, we are. I think a lot of us are seeing a conversation happening that feels misguided towards the actual cause of what happened.
Yeah, it's talking past us, isn't it? And so
Yeah.
there's a comment here from one of our writers. So it's not fair to say that Esther had a specific responsibility to engage with the trans community and trans rights. And so we're reticent to say that her lack of engagement is a failure, but it does sting somewhat that this phone-free education campaign is endorsed by Mumsnet.
Exactly,
Right?
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we're talking about, because this is a conversation that now allows us to not sit and think about the ways in which, you know, the system that is most unnamed in this scenario, transphobia, has been such a big factor in this. It reminds me in particular of the famous case where we get the notion of the bystander effect from.
Okay.
So I can give a brief rundown of that and what my point is with that, if you like. We get the idea of the bystander effect from the case of Kitty Genovese. She was a queer woman living in a city, and she was attacked right outside of her apartment. And as the general story goes, the many of her neighbors looked out, and did nothing basically, and she died. And if you want a fantastic, way deeper breakdown than this, I really recommend the episode about this that's done by You're Wrong About. They do a fantastic job of breaking it down. But when you actually look at the history of that, right, because people heard all of that case, that story, and there was famously the comment of a person, why didn't you get involved? But I didn't want to get too involved, is what he said. Well, didn't you go and help her? I didn't want to get too involved. So then psychologists start picking it up, they start examining it, they give it a name, bystander effect, why don't we step in and do things when other people are in danger? And, it's a common thing now. It's kind of part of that common popular psychology that people can reference. And that's not actually what happened with Kitty Genovese. It actually was a much sadder story than that. Several of her neighbors did see what was happening. One person shouted out of his window at the attacker, tried to scare him off. Other people tried calling the police. There was someone who I think tried to there was multiple people that noticed and tried to do something about it. And she even, I believe she even like died like with neighbors around her. And what happened is when the police turned up, Kitty Genovese was a lesbian and she had a partner. And the man who gave that quote of, I didn't want to get involved, was a friend of hers who actually was a queer man himself. he did not want to get Kitty Genovese in and her partner in any more upset than what had already happened. And he also didn't want to get any flack himself from the cops. So he batted away. Or, I mean, I can't read intention into it, but it seems pretty obvious. He later that night, I think, went and comforted the partner, at least according from what I remember from this podcast years ago. Okay. But the point is, people did notice and try and do something, but then the story that is a much more shocking story that ignores the ways in which queer people are more likely to face violence and then have to respond to that violence differently. We weren't able to have that conversation. Instead, the conversation became the bystander effect. It became, why does a neighborhood look by and do nothing? And I don't know, the way that we're talking about how this is being framed and how the facts as we know them from the case are becoming quite different things. It's reminding me of that. It's reminding me of this other conversation that is more pertinent, feels like it's being not acknowledged, ignored. Like, it's there, it's this elephant in the room. But the more that I'm seeing the phone-free education thing, the more I'm like, oh no, are we going to end up in a position when we bring in some policy and then a lot of cis people get to pat themselves on the back and say, we did something really good there, and change very little in terms of what that means for trans people and our likelihood of facing violence.
Something else I just wanted to pick up on is, so Esther doesn't go so far as to suggest that the internet, access to social media on her phone and the internet, she doesn't suggest that transed her daughter, and she also doesn't go so far as to say that Brianna would be alive were she not trans. But both of those things kind of form an undercurrent to the discussion when it's been had in broader media. I think, like, there's that kind of undercurrent of, had things been different, had she not been trans, this wouldn't have happened to her. Who the hell knows if that's true, right? Because the people who'd been influenced by their consumption of stuff on the dark web, they... I don't want to get too into what the perpetrators were doing, but they made like lists, didn't they? And Brianna was at the top of that list, and that is why we ended up with what we ended up with.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, I suppose there's the concern of how this sort of campaign could be spun in a way that could be a concern, which I suppose when Esther approaches this, it's probably one where it probably needs to be kept in mind.
Like,
yeah, well,
Mumsnet are able to support this and look pro-trans. That's kind of what my issue is with this.
Suggesting a broad blanket ban on phones at school might seem like a good solution, but I don't think it is. It's not the right solution. You're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
No, I mean, if you're in a classroom and a teacher's teaching, you need to pay attention to the class, but anything else seems like a bit of an overreach after that. Or
yeah.
Although, to be fair, I've got a bit of a sledgehammer thought there anyway. There's a lot more nuance to it than just that as well.
Indeed. So there is some upcoming guidance for trans children in schools, and we're all a bit unnerved by what that's going to consist of.
Yeah.
That in its own right.
If you only ban phones in schools, you're actually banning children from accessing phones during the time when they are least likely to in the day. Most of the kind of cyberbullying and most of the kind of abuse online that can happen will happen in their free time. We need to, definitely have a conversation about how easy it is for people to be radicalized.
Yes.
By, manipulative disinformation. Because that's definitely what, the killers were engaging in. I think that we need to talk about what is accessed and how, as opposed to when is it accessed. If we're going to have that conversation, but that's still not the conversation of how do we stop specifically transphobic hate crimes? How do we specifically reduce and prevent people from being killed because of them being trans? Like that is a very important question. And I think it feels almost like there is a defensiveness to talk about that. I mean, we know that there's a defensiveness to talk about that in like Parliament or whatever. Sure. They don't want that. They want to do the opposite. Totally. But I feel like now in that in the wider sort of cultural sort of space that we're in, media and all things like that, it means that there can now be sympathetic reporting on Brianna that completely ignores her transness.
Yeah, quite. There are far broader problems than phone use in schools. And I'm not just talking about for trans people there. We just mentioned like people being radicalized by disinformation. That is a much broader problem in society. Obviously, it does affect trans people if the disinformation is about them, but the disinformation can so often be about, those pesky critters on the left or whatever. Yeah. Disinformation and misinformation are something that needs to be tackled, right, on a very broad front. But that's not what this is doing.
No. And also it's even in that example of like the disinformation and whatnot, like that's primarily how MAGA have been able to get such a foothold in older populations. And by older,
and reform.
Yeah.
And also with the general AI videos and their proliferation in its own
exactly.
way as well.
Exactly. I mean, it's getting to the point now where you have to start doing the same shit that you do to spot if someone's a fae. You're like having to look at the fingers and the toes, make sure the ears look right. Like it's just weird.
Onward then, shall we? Moving on to additional occurrences in the current socioeconomic climate, and if you were to put like some screaming noises behind me saying socioeconomic climate, that would probably work out nicely. So let's talk about Ganry.
Yes, so our next story is about Ganry. There has been a set of new challenges to the EHRC's fitness to operate as a human rights regulator. Several organisations have made submissions to Ganry, which is the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, specifically their SCA, which is Subcommittee on Accreditation.
And you don't think the acronym's just a little clunky?
I know, it's quite catchy.
There's one submission from Scottish Trans, another from TAC, and a third, which is collectively from Transsexual CIC, Trans Plus Solidarity Alliance, and Amnesty International UK. Now, these three submissions from 5 organisations all kind of complement each other and cover similar ground. Basically, since the last review of the EHRC's accreditation in 2023, you might remember us reporting on that, there hasn't been enough done to improve its community engagement, transparency, or independence from government. All of those were issues that Ganry previously said the EHRC needed to be better on. And, So, engaging with the community? Well, the EHRC tried to make their code of practice consultation only 2 weeks long, so not to mention that it seems to have had an awful lot of correspondence with Sex Matters. And then transparency? The EHRC won't tell us how they conducted their AI analysis of the consultation responses, and it no longer accepts FOI requests from TAC. And as for independence from government, well, when choosing the next head of the EHRC, both parliamentary committees consulted objected to the candidate, but Bridget Phillipson appointed Mary Ann Stevenson anyway. In the past year, the EHRC has been pretty committed to the idea of quote-unquote biological sex, and has seemingly been desperate to push that position via its interim update. And that's despite deep concerns being raised by trans people and MPs, by UN experts, the Lemkin Institute and the Council of Europe and others. Would a partridge in a pear tree like to make an appearance? It may be the EHRC's duty to interpret the law, but it should also have a duty to challenge bad law, and it is failing. So, we managed to get a spokesperson for the Equality and Human Rights Commission to speak to us. Because we're connected like that.
We know their email address.
Yeah, it's almost like they have a press office. Anyway, they essentially said, we're confident that we remain fully compliant with the Paris Principles and we're pleased to have this confirmed by the SCA only last year when we retained our A status as a national human rights institution. Blah, 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 blah. We're coming for your rights, don't worry about it. Blah, 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 blah. So, that's where we're at right now.
I'm sure we don't want to read out the whole thing.
All right, no, all right, I won't do that. I'll do the whole thing. We're confident that we remain fully compliant with the Paris Principles and we're pleased to have this confirmed by the SCA only last year, when we retained our A status as a national human rights institution. The SCA takes an evidence-based approach to its deliberations, and we have already written to them to address the serious inaccuracies contained within the information submitted by other third parties earlier this year. We have yet to be invited by the SCA to comment on the arguments within its latest call for a special review, but we will give them careful consideration and do so in due course. We take our obligation to protect equality and champion everyone's rights under the Equality Act 2010 extremely seriously, including those with the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. A shared and correct understanding of the law is essential to that endeavour. As Britain's independent equality regulator, we uphold and enforce the Equality Act. We do not make the law, it's our job to accurately explain how it works in practice, as we have done at every opportunity since the Supreme Court's judgment on the definition of sex in the Equality Act. Yes.
Yes, very good.
So basically, like I said, we're top notch, we're okay, we're good, we're fine, we're coming for your rights, don't worry about it. So
We've reviewed
pretty
ourselves
much.
and we found no wrongdoing.
yeah, as is at least my personal interpretation of that statement.
Yeah, that statement is just so infuriating, isn't it? So
It is.
Slimy.
let's take it back to the statements then and the submissions from Scottish Trans and TAC and so on. So TAC have put their whole statement up online, which we will absolutely be putting a link. Yeah, you hear the noise.
We'll yeet that in the description.
Yeah, we'll yeet that into the description. Thank you, Alex. Nice callback.
Oh god, I feel myself withering away in time, like the Doctor when he's being caught by the Master. This is every time Alex says yeet, I feel myself get a decade older somehow.
Yeah, so give that a read. It's good. It doesn't pull its punches, and nor fucking should it, frankly, because this is the EHRC are the Equality and Human Rights regulator in the same way that the Ministry of Peace in 1984 dealt with peace. You know, it's the opposite. It's just doublethink at this point. Fuck 'em.
Yeah, they're just desperate at this point, and you can reek. They just reek of panic at the moment. And we saw the Guardian letter from Faulkner the other day, and
Fingers crossed Ganry actually, pull their finger out and say, hey, EHRC, you guys suck. Sort it out. But I don't know. Honestly, you'd think that would have happened already, but it hasn't.
because like in 2022 we tried it, and then they got given £1 million by the British government, and we're like, oh no, this looks good to me. So I'm expecting them to have an imminent donation. So just keep an eye out for that one.
I think that's the odd thing about this is, I mean, it clearly is quite a big thing to mark them down because they seem to be very reticent to do it. The last one that they did, the last review that they did, it was they kept it at A, but they pointed out several areas of actual we need to see improvement on this. I'd like to think that is a last chance saloon, motherfucker, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it is. I want that to happen because I think that the institution is not fit for purpose, and I think it is actively hostile towards marginalised people. We're just going to have to wait and see, as ever.
Yeah, I suppose they've completely lost their trust. Well, the trans community has completely lost their trust in the EHRC, and it's quite like Labour in our next story.
Indeed.
So the Circus of Horrors continues now with some of that lovely polling data we know you're all so very keen on. There's just a couple of YouGov polls we'd like to highlight. So the first one is from October the 23rd and presents us with the fact that 91% of the 457 trans people who participated in the survey do not trust the Labour Party. I know, right? What an astounding result. Unbelievably, that figure rises to 96 when talking about the Conservatives, but is as low as 60% when talking about the EHRC, which did in fact surprise us. We would have assumed that figure to be way higher. Also, the poll found that only 25% of trans people trust the police, and that 31% trust judges and the legal system. We quite like the NHS though, as overall, because even though 59% reported that they had trouble accessing healthcare, 72% of the trans people they surveyed said they trusted the NHS. The poll was commissioned by the Good Law Project, and their executive director, Joe Morm, said that, quote, Labour knows the jeopardy trans people endure, and before the election it promised to remove indignities for trans people who deserve recognition and acceptance. But in government it has lined up alongside the Tories and Reform UK at the Cruelty Olympics, which is a good phrase we'll probably end up using a lot more often. So, sticking with the YouGov polls commissioned by the Good Law Project, let's talk about another one, this time from October 27th. This one was in particular about the perceived safety for trans people in the UK. So, have a think about that one for a second. What percentage of trans people would you think would say the UK is not a safe place for us? Go on, have a think about it. We'll wait. So it's 84%. 84% of trans people saying that the UK is unsafe. 65%, so nearly 2/3, have reported verbal abuse while in public spaces, and 24%, nearly a full quarter of us, that say they've experienced physical violence. Since we can't get away from talking about it, the survey also asked about toilets, with 49% of respondents saying they had difficulties accessing the appropriate toilets when out and about in public. This time, Jessa Thompson drew the media statement straw and said, quote, in recent months, many trans people have been living in abject terror. They're afraid of being harassed, outed and discriminated against. It is appalling that nearly half of trans people reported they are now finding basic toilet access difficult, and despite the EHRC's claim that they are protecting people, the fact that only 14% of trans people feel safe in this country represents a devastating humanitarian crisis. It's worth pointing out that both of these bits of poll data came from the same dataset of 457 trans people who were surveyed between July and August this year. So it's not an absolutely massive dataset, but we feel that it's probably a fairly accurate reflection where the community is as regarding to these topics.
There was a lot of numbers. It was a fun read. When I was sort of pulling all of that together, it was like there's a few press statements from GLP and a couple of other places, like, bloody hell. But, like, are we surprised by this? The fact that trans people don't think the UK is safe? Is that a surprise to anyone?
No.
Well, if you are surprised, leave a message in the comments section.
Skeet us at the trans.
This is data that you can show to, like, friends and family who don't quite get it when you say it in, like, the straight up human terms. But for us who in the community every day, it's like, yeah, of course, this is very representative actually of the general attitudes and the proportions of people with those attitudes, at least that I've met.
You could probably send it to the statisticians in your family at least.
They'll find some way to argue against it. Don't.
So it's a small sample size. So I want to just highlight the 25% of trans people trusting the police. I think that number... Sorry,
not you, but...
Yeah. I think that number is far too high. We're going to have to work to get that down.
Yeah, get in line now. Come on. Who protects us?
The best argument against trusting the police is the police. So I'm sure that number will go down as time goes on.
Yeah.
So
I mean, to be fair, and also we've seen things about the hate crime reporting just plummeting from just general distrust as well anyway.
yeah.
So,
They're saying, ooh, hate crime stats are going down. That's a good thing. Well, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of my biggest issues with like crime stats and the way that they get reported
Same.
on, because 9 times out of 10, they're measuring a difference in the way that they measured things before, and it's normally a case if you've changed some stuff and that changes the number, as opposed to there is less crime happening. It's normally that you're seeing less of it.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. And with all the news about trans incarceration, all the stories of how they've changed, how judges judge crimes against trans people, and how people have been treated in courts recently.
Yeah.
Like you'd be put through a lot of trauma in just the fact that in a lot of courts they might not even some people might just dead name you in there,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't get any repercussions for it. When you see these numbers about trust in the police, and then you see the hate crime numbers go down, I can see why.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very clear that in this instance, it's not because there's less crime happening, it's because people aren't trusting the police will do anything. And yeah.
Like, what's the point of reporting? What's it going to do? I'm just going to have to give a statement. I'll get misgendered or dead named by the officer.
Yeah.
Or if you get sexually assaulted, they'll turn it around and incarcerate you instead, as we've seen with a bunch of instances, especially in the last episode.
Yeah, kind of sucks. So, right. Moving on then. So, as you probably noticed if you're a regular listener, we've been banging the Right to Your MP drum for quite a long time. And thank you to anyone who's contributed by doing this. It looks a little bit like this may have actually borne fruit. Because apparently, dozens of Labour MPs have written to ministers with a warning that implementing the proposed EHRC guidance as it stands would create chaos. So firstly, that's our regular mention of the EHRC out of the way, so take a drink. And secondly, while we welcome this letter, we think the framing is a little off. Because the letter to the ministers didn't talk about how the guidance would create chaos for trans people, but because it would create chaos for businesses and firms who would then have to find a way to implement them. So, not the best framing. The letter was written specifically to Peter Kyle, the business secretary, and was apparently signed by nearly 50 Labour MPs. A copy was provided to The Guardian, who had the story up on October the 23rd. It states that organisations all over the UK have spoken about their, quote, concern about the potential impact on service delivery and cost implications of the Code of Practice if it mirrors the approach set out in the EHRC's draft code. Another concern is the, quote, legal and compliance minefield that businesses would have to face if they were the ones who had to responsibly balance the rights of trans people with providing women-only spaces as a result of April's Supreme Court ruling. Bit of a longer quote here, but the letter goes on to say, quote, businesses have told us that while up until now they have been used to resolving issues quickly and quietly, in line with the corporate codes of conduct about values of tolerance and respect, and with a common sense approach, they believe that, if the draft code becomes an official code of practice, they will find disputes frequently escalating into expensive court action. Some of the main concerns of the businesses who've been in touch is that as a result of the ruling, staff will essentially be obliged to police gender and how this could make staff uncomfortable, the, quote, moral, legal and practical quagmire of identifying the gender identity of an individual based solely on their looks, and, quote, the unresolved legal contradiction between the potential for being sued for challenging someone's gender versus being sued for failing to. And in some masterfully specific criticism, it said, quote, we do not believe the Equality and Human Rights Commission has provided satisfactory responses to questions around how they expect businesses to implement such stringent expectations. So, yes, good. Glad they got that in there. Now, there's a few other bits like the reputational damage this would do to the UK on the international stage, the already in progress brain drain of trans and non-binary talent moving abroad, and citing some evidence that international organisations with offices in the UK are limiting travel here for trans and non-binary staff for fear that they'd be unable to use the correct toilets in airports and train stations and stuff. Now, the response to the letter has, of course, so far been rather underwhelming and doesn't say anything we didn't already know. It simply said that the EHRC has submitted its updated guidance to Equalities Minister Bridget Phillipson and that, quote, the government will consider the draft updated code and, if the minister approves it, lay it before Parliament. So, just a completely nothing response to that letter. Just saying, oh yes, well, we know, but shut up and wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about the draft code, which the government's still sat on, and it's been sitting on for weeks on end, and
yes.
Now they're in a civil war, probably with Lucy Powell, who's also still opposing it now. So now they're probably having arguments in number 10 or something, and
well, I hope so.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah. So who knows? Maybe we'll see it by the time someone gets an appointment at the Sandyford Clinic.
Yes, indeed. You never know. God damn it! I'm saying indeed so much.
It's okay. We all have anchor words. There's a compilation of Brendan Lee Mulligan. His anchor word for whenever he wants to move on to something is incredible.
Incredible. Okay.
It's great.
Let's move on. Let's talk about our favourite little bit of the room.
Yes.
Yeah, stood in the corner like the Blair Witch. It's a loser.
Loser's Corner.
Oh no, it's not a train.
Well, hopefully this one will put some wind in your sails. For Losers Corner this week, we are rowing all the way down to Cambridge, where the CUCBC, that's Cambridge University College Boating Club,
And you don't think the acronym's just a little clunky?
I know, it was quite catchy.
not a new state-funded children TV channel, voted to change the constitution of the club for the sake of excluding trans people. So it's clear who the loser is, but why? Well, because Trans Liberation Cambridge were ready at the catch, and they decided to get in their boats and enjoy a gentle float in the River Cam, specifically to stop the boat club's regatta race. They successfully prevented most of the boats from being able to compete, and from the photos they posted, it looked like they were having a whale of a time. Apparently, this move has been even unpopular with students who row, who spoke up about wanting to row with their peers as they always have. And, well, that's kind of it, really. If we get any updates that the boat club has decided to fall in before they catch a crab, then we'll let you know.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a bit of a row at the rowing club.
I hope that whoever in our audience does rowing appreciated the rowing puns that I specifically Googled, because I was like, I wonder how many I could... What's the weirdest phrase that they use in rowing? And I thought catch a crab is the funniest, so...
Right, so what does catch a crab mean?
Don't test me on my short-term memory.
Okay.
No, it's something to do. So because falling in is when you call out to make sure that everyone rows in the same direction as each other. So they might say like fall in, and then there'll be like 2, 4 or whatever, and it'll be like those people that have to fall in. And I think catch a crab is when the oar moves in a certain way that does a certain thing, and now my autistic need to Google things I'm going to put in catch a crab, and it's just going to come up with an image of a crab being caught.
Of someone catching a crab,
Or
yeah.
just crab wave.
It's a faulty stroke in which the oar is jammed underwater or misses the water altogether.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There we go.
Fun times. But it's like the Cambridge rowing and Oxford rowing and stuff. That's just such a high level, I don't want to use this phrase, but hoity-toity thing.
Yeah, we called them RAWs when I was in uni, because they'd be like raw, yeah, raw, raw, raw.
I did my gap year.
Yeah. Oh, raw. Where did you do your gap year? Was it in Panama?
No, it was Burma.
I live in hell!
Anyone hungry?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's getting quite close to tea, actually. It's time of recording.
Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
Anyone want some meat? No, that's not the term.
It's no. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat?
Yes.
Yep, that's from the movie Pink Floyd The Wall, which is just trippy and best enjoyed when you're stoned. Anyway, so we have another interview, our final interview in our series about the Gender Clinic files, all the information that was gathered from a series of extremely specific FOIs sent into the various gender clinics, the information for which has been picked over by ourselves and by Queer AF, who we've worked on this project with, and this is the final part of it. So we'll be going back to doing something else for the meat in a couple of weeks. But for now, here's the final interview with Claire, where we talk about the future of the gender clinics and where they could go, where they should go, what needs to happen, all that stuff. So let's play the tape, shall we? Thanks for joining us again, Claire. How have you been doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's an absolute pleasure as usual. Not too bad. How are you both?
Good, good. Got a birthday coming up, so I'm getting cards and, emailed vouchers for things, so that's nice.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will admit mine's coming up soon as well.
Scorpio, are you?
Oh, indeed.
Yeah. No wonder people are scared of us.
Wonder why.
Yeah, that and no other reason. We've got a few questions to get through. We've touched on this a little bit as we've gone along, but some of it just didn't make the cut. So we'll address it directly. The Levy Review. How do you think the data that you've collected could be used by that review if they were so inclined?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. So I think as we mentioned in a previous one, yeah, they got a copy of the original GIC report that I did in 2023. So they've actually got pretty much all of the same findings, and things have only kind of carried on as they were. So, what could they do? What could they do with that data? Well, it lets them see the same things we see. What are the clinicians doing? Because you got to bear in mind, up to this point, the NHS hasn't been collecting or using this data centrally. So nobody's been keeping an eye on any of this, which is why it's got so out of control. So, looking at clinicians' performance, we've actually got a measure around that. It might not be the best measure, but it's a measure that the NHS didn't use previously. So we've got indications around staffing, we've got indications around budget, we've got indications around cost per appointment by clinic as well now, which are all kind of useful bits of information. What I think could be useful could be completely different to what the Levy Review thinks is completely useful. But it's all useful in its own way at the end of the day. But I think for me specifically, it's things like measuring appointments versus, how much of a shortfall have you got, because that kind of then drives your staffing levels, for example. So if you're 10,000 appointments short and you're only delivering 500 appointments a year, that kind of gives you a rough indication how many appointments, how many clinicians you'd need to then drive the amount of appointments you need to deliver to make up that 10,000 shortfall. So you kind of work it backwards from that point. So there's loads of different ways it can be used. I think the bigger question, and I'll kind of probably throw this back at the peer review here, is do you actually think they're going to be using any of that?
Well, quite. Yes, absolutely. Fair question. And I think given the speed with which it was put together and the way that they seem to have rushed through certain parts of it and have seemingly excluded certain voices from the room once again, as Cass did, it's not looking good, is it? And I think what they could do is to say, oh my God, look at all of these things. We have got waiting lists of over 200 years in some clinics. We have to do something about this, right? Any organization that had the ability and the will to do something about this could.
Yes.
But they haven't. So maybe one of those two things exists. but clearly not both.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and again, I think as we kind of briefly mentioned last time, is that some other groups have been FOIing, and I've kind of seen some of those FOIs, and I do know, based on those, that Levy is actually collecting on a monthly basis the a lot of the very same similar type of information that I request that I've used in the analysis and in the dashboard for the last few years. So we are getting the same information. The big question, I suppose, is are they using it in the same way? Which we won't know.
I suppose one question I was sort of asking is what are their aims for review in general? What are they planning to do with the review? Because, you know, as we saw with Cass, it's quite obvious. It was like, how can we prevent trans kids from actually transitioning?
Yeah.
And this, so if they want to use the data for different, more nefarious purposes.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have got, I think it's up on the, they've got their stated aims, etc. Yeah, a review of adult gender services. I'm just Googling it. Good old Google. Right. Okay. There. So yeah, one of the recommendations of the CAS review was of CAS review was a review of adult service specification. We've already know they're kind of looking wider than that, just from the data that they're collecting. It will examine the operating procedures in each service, appropriateness of the service model for the presenting population, areas of concern, and any action being taken to improve quality. And it will identify areas for improvement in relation to service quality, good practice that could be shared with other clinics. So that's kind of their overarching aim according to what's on the NHS website. So, the question is are they doing that?
Yes.
Yeah, but the seeing the FOIs that we've had from other organisations would suggest they're looking at more than just the service specification, as that would seem to imply.
No, definitely. And I suppose the only way we're going to be able to see is when it finally comes out. But it seems to be when it was last mentioned, it was going to be towards the end of the summer, which it's October now, coming up November.
Well,
I wonder why.
I think actually, I'm sitting there laughing. We shouldn't laugh because it's such a ridiculous situation.
We were worried that Levy was going to come out before us at one point.
Yeah. Funny story, because I actually took part in one of the Levy interview sessions and feedback sessions as part of East of England / Nottingham. And that was pretty much almost a year ago.
A year ago, blimey.
Yeah, going from memory, it was some point in November. So, you're talking like at least 11 months. And going from memory, I think at the time it was only supposed to run for about 3 to 4 months and was supposed to report in April this year, I think it was, originally. And then it got pushed to May, and then August, and then September. And now we're in October.
Obviously, you gave him a lot to think about.
Yes, well, I think the problems faced by the clinics, as we all know, extend far, far further along than just the service specification.
I know one of the things that we heard about people that were participating in the... That's probably the wrong word. As in the people who worked within GICs, right, who were expressing their own concerns about the rush there seemed to be to gather the data and send them this data and send them this. And for them to have gathered all of that data and done a proper analysis on it and then want to get it out by the end of the summer, like that was always like a fool's gambit. That was always going to fail if that's what they were trying to do. I am cynical as to what I think they might be ultimately using that data for, in terms of the recommendation. If they found a situation that was counter to what they were expecting to find, right? Maybe they were going into it completely guilelessly and assuming, I'm sure everything's fine, or it would be a bigger story. And they found that actually everything is not fine, and they're working really hard to build up a series of recommendations that would improve things. Great. Okay. I am not hopeful that's the case, though. I suspect they went in with a kind of prearranged predetermined consensus that all the data in the world would not challenge.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would share your cynicism, to be fair.
Mm.
And I think it doesn't instill any confidence in the community that it's facing delays after delays after delays. And as I said, we are already seeing that scope creep is there in the background without them admitting to the fact that that scope creep is there. And I think given there was rumours swirling that Dr. Levy had transphobic leanings, shall we say, from
Yes, yeah.
previous encounters that trans community had had with him running an ICB somewhere, and yeah, that doesn't build confidence either.
Yes, I suppose there's a lot to think about on why it got delayed. So I also spoke to Che from Transactual, who sort of brought up their thoughts on why the Levy review might be delayed. Interview. We've sort of constantly seen the Levy review continuously get delayed and delayed to the point where we're like, you'll probably get a appointment at Glasgow before Levy review comes out. Have you heard much about the delays on Levy?
It depends who you ask. Obviously, it was meant to originally be published in spring. Um, we are we're hoping for it to come out soon. Um, if not to just rip the plaster, if not anything else, just to rip the plaster off, to be honest. We're hoping that it'll be out sooner rather than later. Um, the Wes Streeting's announced a pilot service in the southwest um to support people's mental health on the waiting list, which, by the way, we're seeking more information on what that will be like, because we do think the mental health support is um, important as long as it's appropriate. But anyway, that that's been announced could be a signal that the Levy report will be out soon, because we're imagining that it's going to comment on the huge waiting times. So it would probably look good for the Department of Health and Social Care to say, oh, yes, this report's out and we're already doing something about it. Whether it's the right thing, whether it's enough, is a different matter. But for me, that's just signaling that it's probably going to be out sooner rather than later.
To get us back to talking about Levy in specific, then. So in your data, you've mentioned that there were two approaches to dealing with the backlog for the gender clinics. So to start things off, if things were to stay at the GICs, what would need to be done to make sure that the MS? No, that's what I have. The NHS meet the demand now. What needs to happen, do you think?
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, the analysis I did obviously did a bit of kind of number crunching around how many clinics we might need, and there's kind of two figures to bear in mind. So to meet just the referral demand for last year, so this is just for last year, we would need around 33 plus clinics
Right.
running at the same size and operational capacity as Indigo as a benchmark. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
so that is 18 plus clinics over what we've already got. To put that into context, so this is just meeting current demand, right? That would mean, based, as I said, using Indigo, we would need 243 additional staff, or more than 243 additional staff, 63 of which would be clinician level, so able to diagnose. And the budget for that would be in excess of 31 million.
A lot of dough.
Yeah, that is not a drop in the ocean, is it?
No, but it's basically the capacity is it would broadly need to be doubled just to meet the current demand, and that would not even touch the waiting lists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just for...
And if we extend that further, one of the other figures I mentioned is we would need more than 83 clinics if we wanted to clear the wait list in a year. just to get people to the point of potentially, say, getting HRT and having a first appointment, we would need an additional, well, we'd need more than 83 additional clinics. All right. So again, in context, using Indigo as a benchmark, that would mean an additional 1,120 staff, of which 290 would be clinical, and the budget for that would be more than 141 million. And if we place that in and if we place that in context, the whole budget for the entire GRC service that is current, not including any pilot schemes that are running, is less than 28 million.
It's like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, it's crackers, isn't it? Because the problem's got so far out of control now, it's either going to take a massively significant investment, and it wouldn't be a one-off investment either, because you've got to extrapolate further from this, and that just gets people to that first appointment level, right? Within a year. So it's not even meeting the NHS's 18-week constitutional benchmark or anything like that. We're talking within a year. You've then got to maintain that, because we know there's a surgical backlog, because there's not enough surgical capacity either. So as a good chunk of those people are going to be wanting to go on surgical side of things in some way or another, and they're going to have to stay with the GICs for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years until they get surgery, unless surgical capacity is increased as well. So that 141 million investment would have to be sustained for a period of at least 5 or 6 years, if not more, if they don't do anything about surgical capacity. Numbers are mind-boggling.
So over the course of 5 or 6 years, we're talking about £500 million.
Yeah, because they've neglected the problem for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
The Matter Levy review took so long to think about it.
Yeah.
Well,
if they get the same sort of outcome we did as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting thing to see. And that, as I say, that is just very, very rough, back of a fag packet number crunching, based on what I already know. Mostly out of the dashboard, the financial figures kind of somewhat unofficial. I know roughly what Indigo work at, but I've not had anything official from them, so I can't really say where I got that information from. But I know it's about right. So it's ballpark. It's going to be in excess of those numbers that I kind of said. So can you see the NHS chucking that kind of money at resolving the problem for trans healthcare? Because I can't.
No, definitely. I think whenever there's been this discussion about the GICs, there's often the more cost-effective method that is often touted, which is just scrapping the GICs and bringing this to primary care. Could you?
Yeah. That's kind of the conclusion that I've come to, as have numerous other people. I'd probably come at it from a slightly different perspective. It should be in primary care and informed consent anyway. So, for anybody who doesn't know, informed consent, basically, you're rocking up to your GP and effectively say, I am trans, I want to start hormones. Get me started. Sign whatever I need to sign, waivers, whatever I need to do waivers-wise. But that's it. It's my choice. It's my decision. I'm an adult. So that's broadly what we talk about when we talk about informed consent. I've come at it from a slightly different perspective in that, yes, that's how it should be. The NHS isn't anywhere near that yet. However, can we prove the financial case to say, actually, the GRC model is unsustainable? And I think we've just done that. So what is cheaper? Are we going to spend £500 million over 5 or 6 years, or are we going to spend 10 million to train every GP in the country to do it via an informed consent basis? To me, it's a no-brainer.
Indeed. So which just does kind of point you in the direction of there is an ideological basis for keeping it the way it is, and we'll be coming back to that, right? So given that the model's not working, right? That original diagnostic model, which has been outdated for years and years and years, and it's been obviously clung to for much, much longer than it should have. Why do you think they've stuck to it for so long?
Oh, I mean, the obvious answer is transphobia, and having dealt with some of the people, especially the top end, when I was with the NHS sounding board, having had conversations with the people that are in charge of this stuff, I think it is fairly clear that transphobia is a very big part of the problem. Um, the way they talk about trans people is just frankly horrific, and this is the people that are in charge of commissioning the services. So it doesn't fill me with any kind of confidence at all. Yeah, we've effectively got a two-tier GIC model now because we've got most of the GIC, the traditional, the old GICs are still working off of the so-called interim service spec from 2013. So that's like 12 years plus out of date.
Yeah.
And then we've got the pilot clinics and services. I mean, we shouldn't call them pilots now, but the newly commissioned services like
Yeah.
Indigo and Transplus and any of the new ones that are kind of in pilot phase at the moment. And they're on the amended service spec, which I think was 2016, 2018, something like that. Which is, in fairness, isn't drastically different. All it really does, because I know it was a long while ago when I did this, but I did a kind of a compare and contrast of the two. And broadly speaking, the biggest benefits from the amended service spec that the pilot schemes are using is it gave them a little bit more latitude and leeway to do things in a different way. So it wasn't as gatekeepy, although that element is still there within it. And rather than doing things linearly, so you'd have to start HRT and be stable on HRT before you started hair removal, before you got referred for surgery. That's the old model that did things quite linearly. It was you could do some of that stuff in parallel. So you could start HIT, be referred to for hair removal services, and start talking about where you want to go if you want to go for surgery and whatnot, all at the same time in the new model. So that's where I think it helped speed things up a little bit for the new services. They've got a little bit more freedom to do what they need to do. Hence, otherwise I don't think we'd actually see the likes of Indigo exist, to be fair. Having something that's trans run and trans led in trans healthcare in the UK, yeah, right. But I think that's what enabled that, even if it's not perfect, it's a step in the right direction. But is it sustainable? And I think we've answered that question. But the whole service model, whichever way you look at it, is still built around a gatekeeping model of some description.
It is.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And it's obvious that it's been stuck to. I think personally that the reason it's been stuck to for so long is because it's become such a problem. A, nobody wants to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
B, the political will has never really existed. And C, I don't want to say the moral case hasn't been made, because it absolutely has, but it's not been taken on board by the people who actually make the decisions in terms of like holding the purse strings and saying yes to a service. For a long time, people that were at least willing to listen to trans people, hopefully, maybe even those who are sympathetic to trans people, haven't been in positions where they've been able to say, right, let's do this. And as you say, Claire, that's kind of been changing somewhat recently. We've seen these new pilot clinics, somebody approved those. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that comes back as we kind of said, they've seen that there's a problem, which is why they've been trialing these different models, which is why we've now got a two-tier system. But if it was me, the second you see kind of Transplus and Indigo working much better, then why aren't you transferring the new clinics to that same service model? And that's a massive failing. And I can't say, is it an institutional failing at the traditional clinics level? is it an institutional failing at NHS England or specialist commissioning level? It's probably a bit of both, to be fair. But it's just like you want to improve things, you've got to make changes. You can't just constantly sit there and go, we'll just chuck this little bit at it and see if it works. And then we might go in that direction. And that's kind of seems to me where things are at the moment.
Well, I'm sort of going, ours is the way we've always done it, and then stuck at it that way in the old pig-headedness.
And I think, they're so wedded to that model as well. And I think it comes back to a point we may have made previously, is that I think a lot of people still don't realise that the service models are still kind of very much based in the old mental health care model, which is when they, sort of 20, 30 years ago, they shoved trans care under the mental health banner. And we all know what the state of mental health services is within the NHS anyway. It's completely diabolical. And these people are just completely unsuited to dealing with trans people because they see trans people as a problem. And I think that's a big part of the problem. It's, in a word, pathologisation, which is what we're trying to get away from. And that's what needs to happen. It needs to be, and this is just my opinion, it needs to be taken away at a minimum from mental health services and completely decoupled from the whole mental health banner to even start rebuilding trust. And that's not even addressing the problems with accessing care at all. That's a whole different scope and level of problem as we've seen. And I do think the only way we're going to fix that is by putting it in primary care now. It's just too big a problem.
No, definitely. I suppose part of the failing of just not addressing it is, do you think it's like a deliberate policy to just at least try and prevent people from transitioning in the first place, seeing it as a negative outcome?
I mean, it's a great question, and it's, again, my opinion only. I think I can only speak from my own experience with the services, in that I haven't found that with the East of England service, but I know people have found that with other services and the more traditional services, and it's the whole gatekeeping approach. And I think when we throw in the level of politicisation that we've seen in trans healthcare for the last 7 or 8 years, especially under the current Minister for Health, then I think there's a worry that there is a deliberate back end policy that isn't kind of official, that like they've done with CAS, to try and stop people from transitioning. And I mean, if that's the case, it will all come out in a wash eventually. But people are going to be harmed in the intervening time. And it comes back to what we've said again, what is stopping them from actually improving services? Well, nothing. Nothing is stopping them other than they're having the political and medical will to do so.
In one of my many Green Party chats where we were all just bitching about Wes Streeting, and I said, like, look, dude, you're supposed to be a Labour health minister, not an evil high priestess. So maybe someone should explain that to him a little bit more forcefully. But
with a stick.
With a stick. Okay, so going back to the data then, a little more comfortable spot for us to be, perhaps, less kite flying. When you've been compiling all the data, you've mentioned on the interviews before, so thinking about when you've been compiling it and putting it all together, you've said it would be very helpful if the data was a little bit more standardized, yes? So what kind of data would you like to see put into that standardization at any potential gender service?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I think there's actually kind of more of a two-level question. This actually is there is a whole bunch of stuff that should be standardized, but it should also be freely published as well. Because if they're not going to be truthful with us, then give us the data and at least we'll work it out ourselves, like we've already done. If you've got nothing to hide, nothing to fear, right? So
they say.
Yeah, But I mean, in terms of standardisation, and some clinics do little bits of this already. I'm going to point out, I think it's Edinburgh for this one, because they do publish quarterly some data. It's not extensive, but you get things like referrals each quarter, number of people on the waiting list each quarter, and that's kind of a starting point. But I think there's, as I say, multiple levels. We need to look at what needs standardising, and that is things like how many appointments are they doing per clinician, how many clinicians have they got, proper track on their staffing, whether or not those staff are full-time, part-time, etc., because that does have an impact on how many appointments they can deliver. I think we might have mentioned that previously, but it's
We did.
if you've got to recap in case anybody's listening in for the first time, if you've got a clinician working full time, they can basically do somewhere between 3 or 4 appointments in a day, because each appointment, including admin, takes about an hour and a half or so to do. So if you've got that as a baseline, if you've got a clinician that's only working half a day, they can't do 2 appointments. They at best can probably do 1. So actually, it's like you're employing somebody who can't really be effective because there's a chunk of their time that they can't actually use to actually see a patient. So from my basis, you want to see more actually full-time staff rather than part-timers. And I think that's part of the problem that we don't have a full handle on, but suspect is what's going on. But things like that, referral rates, so how many referrals they get each month, but also how many they accept out of that month. So not how many they've accepted in that month, but what proportion of that month have they accepted. So actually tying measures back to original data rather than kind of having it separate and standalone, so that you can, you have trouble kind of marrying it up effectively. So you can kind of see, from that, you would be able to see, what proportion of people are actually being accepted into the service and whether or not a service is actually playing fast and loose with acceptance rules or being too harsh or something like that. So there's lots of this kind of stuff. Waiting list is the biggie. How big is the waiting list? But tying that to how long people have waited as well, because they're the 2 things that will give you an indicator as to where the service is going. And initial appointment rates, being able to pull that out, initial appointments and other appointment types, so you can actually granularly look at what those staff are actually doing on an appointment level basis. Again, let's use Indigo as an example. They've effectively got a reasonably flat structure, so you've got your care navigators and you've got your clinical staff. And they were able to actually split out quite clearly between the 2. So care navigators would do certain appointments, clinical staff would do certain appointments, and I got a really clear measure of how many they were actually doing on each side. Most of the clinics can't do that. So they need the capacity to actually do that, and then it lets you track, monitor, and manage the service. These are basic performance metrics that, if you said to Amazon, how many things are you picking per hour per person, they'll be able to do that off the top of their heads, and they'll know exactly what the performance measure is for each of their pickers in a warehouse.
Yeah.
The NHS hasn't got anything like that for gender services. And that's the kind of info you actually need to manage a service.
Yeah, so I think making NHS clinicians work on Amazon working conditions is the whole thing that I think some of us would probably be like, but there's a lot of important data on that front. But
as I say, it's more about the kind of information and how it's used, and they've got that information, they're just not using it.
Yes.
I say a lot of them have got that information, but the other half of the standardization thing, as we were saying, is some of them are doing it paper-based, some of them are doing it electronically, some of them are doing it on spreadsheets. There's no set way of actually doing any of this stuff. So you need to centrally put some measures in place that actually say you need to collect this data at a minimum.
Yeah.
And then if you're collecting it, why not publish it? Be transparent. Being transparent helps people trust. and they've got a very
Yeah.
big trust deficit at the moment, and that would be one way of helping to start to bridge that trust deficit. Yeah, it might not be a pretty picture, but at least they're being honest about it.
Hmm.
And that's what we ask, I think, a lot of the time, is a bit of honesty, to be fair.
Yeah, like, we're all adults, we can handle it. If there's going to be a delay for how long and for however reason, you can just say, right?
Yeah.
You're allowed to say this stuff.
No, you can't exactly. Yeah, it's not exactly an HS. I'll go. You can't handle the truth.
Oh dear. Yeah, you're not wrong though.
And I suppose more of a truth that we need is more data. And with what they're collecting, is there any data that they currently don't collect that you think should be collected?
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting one because their data standards across the board are so poor at the moment. It's kind of like, well, can we get them to actually collect the things they should be collecting is I think the first fight.
I see.
Let alone what they don't currently collect. It's one of those you know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know kind of questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Humphrey.
But yeah, I mean the things off the top of my head that I think would be useful that I've actually had some issues in kind of getting because it's kind of thrown them a curveball in some respects is things like age banding data. So that was a real effort to kind of get, and it was clear some clinics really struggled with that. And that should be kind of fairly standard alongside how long people have waited. So you can kind of go, well, you can split it each way. We've got this amount of cohort who have waited X amount of years. You can kind of see from your age banding, as we've seen with some of the data that we've had, and the stuff we've talked about coming out of the collaboration we've done with Queer AF, is we're seeing, and it's entirely expected from my point of view, from what I'm looking at, it's skewed much more towards the younger, under 25s in terms of people that are on the waiting list. And that broadly married to the referral pattern as well. So, which all comes with greater social acceptance. It all comes with people being able to be themselves at younger ages. And we know demographically from looking at other countries, that average age of people coming out has been declining. And it's been declining for, trans guys and those assigned female at birth faster than it has for trans femmes and those of us that were assigned male at birth. And I think there's still a lot of kind of social stigma in and around that. So I think a split between the two as well by assigned sex at birth would actually be some really interesting data because you can really kind of pick out demographic trends from that kind of stuff. And probably I think the other thing as well is some regional analysis. Tying it into people's postcodes, where they live, to kind of I mean, if you take London as an example, Tavistock and Portman, pretty much the only clinic up until recently in the southeast, and you've got people from Essex, Kent, etc., all would have been going to the Tavistock and Portman. But if you could split that data out, you could actually kind of pinpoint we need a clinic, say, down near Folkestone that would do, say, Folkestone, Canterbury, etc., and that would cover X amount of people. You can need a clinic down in the New Forest, which would then cover, say, another chunk. You need another one in North Essex, another two in South Essex. You could use that data to kind of demographically work out where you actually need to put your clinics. So
Yeah, good trans heat map.
yeah, effectively. And then you wouldn't have people having to travel 7 hours plus to come into London or Exeter or wherever because they live out in the sticks, somewhere rural, and they actually don't have anywhere regional to go to, which I think is one of the underlying reasons that was one of the underlying reasons for the pilot services was the idea of having more regional level clinics, smaller clinics that are more regional. And I think actually that probably would have been a good idea 15 years ago. But the problem is too big now, as we've seen. So yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of data they could collect, and they probably do have, and could probably glean out of their electronic records that could be used centrally to some really good effect. But are they? I think we all know the answer to that. So yeah, so I think Levy's going to be really interesting to see what they're talking about in terms of data, etc., as well as kind of everything else. Everybody's a bit on tenterhooks for that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just been frustrating to keep having it bounced along. And we don't know when it's coming out. We don't know what it's going to contain. We're just kind of assuming it's not going to be great. Because it's easier to do that and be pleasantly surprised than think this is going to be amazing and then be bitterly disappointed. So
yeah, the eternal cynic and the eternal pessimist. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Ashley. It's a glass half full kind of thing. Maybe it's a traditional Scorpio thing.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, broad as it is,
Typical,
long.
really, isn't it?
Yeah, stick a finger in the air, and until we kind of get it, having been a small part of it at the beginning, I can't say I'm filled with confidence, but I can say certainly in the session I was in, it was no holds barred, and people were very vocal and forthright in their opinions on just how frankly shit the GIC provision is.
No,
Yeah.
definitely. I suppose Levy and the GICs have one thing in common. It's a long waiting time.
Yeah, give the girl a cigar. All right, so final question, and this is a really heavy,
Ooh.
heavy,
Dun, dun,
really heavy
dun.
question. This, we ready? You're gonna have your data ready. Where can people follow you to keep up with your work?
Right, yeah. I'm kind of gonna have a bit of a revamp, but yeah, my main social media is on Blue Sky, so Claire's Trans Talks on Blue Sky. I'm revamping the front end of my website currently, so it's going to have the dashboard on there, etc., etc. So you'll be able to kind of catch up to all the dashboard stuff, some of the hate crime stuff I've been doing, these podcasts, some other bits and pieces. Hopefully going live this coming weekend, so around 1st, 2nd of November.
Cool.
And that's www.clairestranstalks.co.uk.
Nice.
Rock and roll.
And I think we'll be very excited to see you later on after this episode's release, but we'll be doing a little Q&A on our Discord as well.
Yeah, I'm looking
Indeed.
forward to that. That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, more details as we develop it. But yes, we are indeed doing a Q&A session, an AMA type thing through the Discord. So if you want to be part of that, join our Discord. We'll put a link in the usual place. But thank you so much to you, Claire, for joining us.
And thank you to both of you.
And we probably won't take too long before we speak to you again about something else.
See you next year.
Yes. Thank you, folks. It's been an absolute pleasure as usual.
That's the end of our 3-part series. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found it illuminating. We certainly found out a lot, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm looking
All
forward
sorts
to
of-
writing about something else afterwards.
Yes, you and me both. Yeah. So, with that, let's move on slightly clunkily, but more importantly, quickly, along to some trans joy. Yeah. Okay, so, for some trans joy, we've got Mewkachu says, I saw bits of a private recording of the speech I gave at Trans Pride. I thought nobody had recorded it, but an acquaintance got the beginning at least, so it's not all lost to posterity.
Yeah, nice.
Amazing.
So next up is Zoe S. I made it out of fatigue hell and into a goth club. My knees are not impressed, but right now I don't care. And that's the sentence I'd love to say.
Fantastic. And Melissa says, my trans joy has been getting presented with the inaugural Benjamin Zephaniah Trophy by one of his sisters. My poem is a masterpiece, and even both of Benjamin's sisters said it was worthy of winning. Oh, that's lovely. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's really nice. Christina, the estrogen witch, said my assessment this morning went really well, and I got gendered correctly by the examiner. Awesome. I love that. Bit of gender euphoria while out and about.
And remember, if they don't treat you right, you can always hex them.
Yes. And Hazley is in a play on Tuesday with an all-trans cast at the Derby Theatre, a play called Hindsight. Though, it's almost sold out, so if you can go there, get there quick.
And Jelly says, I don't know if it counts as trans joy, but I am a medical student and I helped out in surgery today and held a uterus for the first time. And you know what? If you're a trans person that gave you joy, then I would say that classifies as trans joy.
Anything that brings joy to a trans person is trans joy. Although be careful, because helping out in surgery and holding a uterus could easily be spun as you were trying to steal somebody's uterus because you're trans. Anyway, Make It Rain says, I've had my e-dose increased literally just yesterday. So congratulations. Hope it works out better for you.
Yes. Lily H said, I don't know. I looked in the mirror the other day and felt cute. In fact, included, they were hella cute.
Yeah.
And Zipporah says, after 8 years on estrogen, my body has only finally started in the last 6 months getting the associated growth as a result because I'm eating better and got given a more appropriate dosage. Amazing! Woo! So happy for you.
Sarah says, one of my loves, who never thought Faye would be able to get bottom surgery because of a very rare medical condition, is going in for the first stage of a 2-stage bottom surgery today.
Oh,
awesome.
Congratulations.
That's very cool.
And I hope they recover quickly and can get the second part done. That's fantastic.
Yes, and next is Laura, Queen of Seagulls. I'm spending this weekend at a beach. With a friend who's emigrating to the Far East soon. But I'm focusing on the joy of making the most out of our time together, rather than the inevitable separation.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
That's just really, really nice. So, yeah.
Esther says, I have been accepted into a women's sailing mentoring scheme, the Magenta Project. Both exciting and very affirming to be supported as a trans athlete. I also bought a beautiful vintage dress last week. And that's amazing. The Magenta Project does sound deeply sinister, though.
Yes.
Love it. Love that for you. But if I was watching a film about people going to a secluded retreat called the Magenta Project, I'd know there is blood to be spilled. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Morwen says, I sent a 6B lead climbing project and I hope to tackle some more 6B and 6B plus climbs this evening. I never could exercise as a man and doing it as a woman brings me great joy.
When I read the 6B, I thought they were talking about a bra fitting for a second there.
I thought they were talking about a type of pencil. So yeah, it's presumably it's a climbing thing. I've definitely Googled, and I'm not just spitballing. So yeah,
I tend to be stuck on 2B or not 2B. I don't know.
Saw where you were going. Didn't react quickly enough. Never mind.
And is it me next?
Oh no, because it is you, isn't it?
I think it's you.
When for the last one.
Sound.
Yeah.
And Olivia says, I see a trans flag draped over a window on my commute home and it never fails to bring a smile. Seeing support after a stressful day. Amazing. Love that.
So such a small thing, but just seeing it out in the wild is like, oh, good. There are some reasonable people.
Yeah.
There are some proper people out there. So next is Carly Silvers on Blue Sky, who said, today I submitted my research proposal for my Histories Masters. Highway women in the early modern. Fact or fiction?
It's highway women in the English early modern. Fact or fiction?
Yeah, let's do that again.
Which sounds fucking amazing.
It does, and it immediately reminds me of the Jonathan Frakes Beyond Belief. Like the music of that started playing in my head the second I have read the words fact or fiction.
You ever been mountain biking?
I love the videos of those questions.
Yes,
It's
me
so
too.
good.
Just video compilations of Jonathan Frakes asking you weird questions. So Kit says, finally got to go to the dentist. 2 new fillings and a hygienist later, and actually my teeth are still a little white in places. And yeah, I recently went on the journey of, going to the dentist several times after not having been for many years. And yeah, it's better now. So congratulations for getting that sorted, because it can be a right fucking faff.
Yeah.
That was me next.
And finally,
Yeah, next is Flaming Daphne. So she was featured in the World of Warcraft's Instagram story feed for 24 hours in a little clip that she did.
fantastic
Amazing.
stuff. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Good stuff.
Well done, you, who I will not give you, because we know Flaming Daphne, also one of our patrons, it must be said, and has a certain connection to the show. But yeah, that was really cool. That's nice to see. So, with that, with the Trans Joy, that's it. That's the end of the show. Thank you very much for listening. You can catch us on all of the socials except Twitter, because Twitter is awful and I don't know why people are still using it. But we're on Blue Sky, on Facebook. What are the other ones we're on?
Instagram.
Well, yes, definitely
Discord,
Instagram. And you can join
And
it.
Patreon.
And Patreon.
And YouTube.
Yes.
And also Ko-fi, if you really want to just give us some dollar, but not if you really want to just give us some money, you can do that.
On Ko-fi,
Proud of you for having some to give.
Yeah, for sure. Well done. Yeah, so our Ko-fi address, which I will link in the description, is what_the_trans. So it's a bit of an annoying one to write out, but if you're able to contribute to that, thank you, we love you, and we will speak to you in a couple of weeks. Toodaloo.
This episode of What the Trans was produced and presented by Flint, Ashleigh and Alyx, and written by Ashleigh, Sammy and Flint. It was edited by Amber Devereaux and Amber Roberts, with our opening theme music performed by Wardsauer Yui Kohlberg. Our episode thumbnail artwork was created by Uboa Piers, and we would especially like to thank our producer-level Patreons, who are
Alexandra Lilly.
Andrea Brooks.
Anubis a Jackal,
April Heller.
Ariadne Pena.
Ashleigh,
B Squared.
Becky Cheadle.
B,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean.
Bernice Roust.
Bex the Mermaid,
Brandon Craig.
Break the System.
Carly Silvers,
Cassius Adair.
Kellen York.
Claire Scott,
Clara Volume.
Crazy Rich.
Cinder Goza,
Danielle Hardwick.
Dan Oblivion.
D,
Dr. McGee.
Dulcie.
Elizabeth Anderson,
L. Gray.
Ellen Meller.
Eric Whitman,
Erin Carlson.
Eris.
Fiona Punchard,
Flaming Daphne.
Flute Punk. Hi Darling.
Gorstar,
Jen.
George Simmons.
Georgia Holden Burnett,
Grubberlicious.
Gray.
Hazel Dust,
Heather Patterson.
Heidi Reardon.
Helen _
I'm a fawn, you dork.
Jack Edwards.
Jane,
Jem Hoskins.
John.
Jordan Starr,
Kai Lewin.
Karakan 12.
Katie Cox,
Katie Reynolds.
Kiki T.
Lara Bailey,
Laura, Queen of Seagulls.
Lauren O'Nions.
Lee Downs,
Lentil.
Levi Hart.
Lex Phoenix,
Lanus.
Melissa Brooks.
Melissa Harker,
Melody Nix.
Mikhail Jajor.
Mika,
Monsieur Squirrel.
Murgatroyd.
Mux Afon,
Naystrom.
Nowart.
Needles and Threads,
Nick Ross.
Ontologically Unjust.
Orion Matrix,
Oshin.
Patreon User.
Rebecca Prentice,
Roberto DePrunk.
Root -1.
Rose Absolute,
Sap.
Sabrina Artis.
Sabrina McVeigh,
Samantha Raven.
Sarah.
Sarah,
Setcab.
Sean Phillips.
Cena,
Siobhan Fergus Evans.
Sky Killane.
Sophie Lewis,
Stella.
Susan K. Quinn.
Tabitha Jo Cox, aka Candy.
Tanya B.
Ted Delphus.
The Socialist Party of Great Britain, 1904.
The Splund.
Tig Slater.
Tin Roof.
Toby.
Transition begins with I am. The rest comes later.
Trowan.
Undead Narfa.
Vic Kelly.
Vic Parsons.
Willow Tree.
And Zoe B. Thank you to you all.
Thank you all for watching.
Thank you. Bye.
Toodaloo.